Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate University live stream series, where essentially I try to tackle as many elements of the admissions process to university, life at university, and in this episode, life after university and graduating. I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, who will shortly introduce themselves. It's amazing that I've managed to get him on my channel, bearing in mind how busy, and you guys will find out how busy he is. And yeah, without further ado, Kiran, do you just want to introduce yourself, who you are, a bit about yourself, and also if you want to kind of talk about your channel and your Instagram, that would be great for people watching this live stream.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Fran. So my name is Kiran. I'm a junior doctor, so I'm a GP trainee working in Manchester. While I was at university, I started doing stand-up comedy as well. So I've been doing comedy on the stand-up comedy circuit for 4 or 5 years now. And then I recently started a YouTube channel and an Instagram page. My handle is Another Indian Doctor. Obviously, a joke about how many doctors we see are Indian.
Amazing. And I've put it on, so I've put his YouTube handle on screen, and it's the exact same for Instagram as well. So definitely check out his channel. It's amazing. And if you're interested in travel vlogs, he used to make them as well, and that's all on his channel. So I guess we'll start off by kind of just talking about your journey to medicine. What med school did you go to, and how was your experience? Did you always want to be a doctor?
Sure. No was the answer. I didn't always want to be a doctor. I had sort of family friends that were doctors, and I was always one of these guys who wasn't sure what I wanted to do. There was a point, like a really strong point. I knew that I really liked public speaking and that sort of thing. And there was a point where I was really wanting to do PPE and become prime minister and that sort of thing. And I just, I think there's quite a strong family influence in Asian families, especially, where you're driven a bit more towards degrees that have specific career pathways as well. So my parents and my relatives always used to say, if you're not sure what you want to do, you should try and aim for a degree that has a job at the end of it. And I knew people that had done medicine, and I was always into sciences and that sort of thing. So it was never like a burning desire that I've always had for ages. It was something that I sort of fell into. And I think I applied to obviously 4 universities. I ended up getting 3 offers. And the one I went to was to the University of Leeds. And I absolutely loved the Leeds. I'd never been before. I'd never even been to the city before I applied there. The first time I went to the Leeds University was my interview. The second time I went was my first day at medical school. So I'd literally never been before, didn't know anyone there. I had the best 5 years at the city and also at medical school. And then I think I found my love for medicine while I was at medical school rather than before. Because I know a lot of people did you know you want to do medicine for a really long time?
In my case, it was slightly different. I mean, it was similar in some senses. So I wanted to do PP at one point, wanted to become first Black Prime Minister as well. That was part of my ambitions, and I realised what politics was. And then I went down kind of a series of career changes. I wanted to do chemistry actually before I wanted to do medicine. And I guess what switched my mind was actually attending chemistry open days and summer schools, and that kind of showed me that chemistry wasn't for me. And I guess it was through research that I found out about medicine. So I guess similar to your story, but different in some senses. And a question actually came in based off kind of what you were saying about how a lot of Asian families, and it's the same for African culture as well, they tend to want their children to go off and do more vocational subjects because you do have that kind of job security at the end of it, especially in this area where it's so hard to get jobs as a graduate. So one of the questions sent in asked, did you feel pressured by your family to want to do medicine? And they go on to say, I'm from an ethnic household and my parents want me to do law or medicine. So yeah, kind of what was your story on that one?
So the answer is yes, definitely. And I think a lot of Asian families are like that. But I think as you get older, you kind of appreciate what they're saying a bit more. Earlier on, I was like, I should be able to do whatever I want. It doesn't matter, that sort of thing. But I think the more I think about it as I get a bit older, I think, was that the right decision for me at the time? Yes. And am I happy with everything that I've done now? The answer is yes. So although at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. That, I think that's the key thing, is that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I think because of that, I was guided a lot more, rather than if I said, I love history, I really want to do history at university. My parents are Asian, but quite liberal. So they would have said, go and do whatever you want to do. But because I kind of came with the attitude of, I don't know what I want to do, they kind of said, well, we think you should be doing subjects that have a degree at the end of it. And I think you sort of have to understand why they're saying that as well, is because they're obviously immigrants to the country. They've come here and had basically nothing. So when my grandparents came here, my granddad drove a taxi and was trying to support 5 children, and he obviously didn't go to university. And my parents were the first people that went to university, that worked really hard. My dad worked as a pharmacist, my mum worked in a bank, also worked really hard. So they obviously appreciate hard work, and in their minds, and a lot of Asian families' minds, that, if you get a degree that has a job at the end of it, you'll be able to earn and provide for your family. And I think that's the most important thing for Asians and for, BAME communities, is being able to provide for their families. And that's the only thing that obviously, your parents want for you. So I think, to answer this question about this creator's daughter saying that, they're getting the pressure to study medicine or law, I think ultimately you have to do something that's right for you, because if you go into it and you hate it and you resent, your family for that, that's obviously a really bad situation to be in, because you're damaging the relationship with your family, and also you're doing something that you don't enjoy. So you've got to kind of find a balance and find something that sort of pleases both of you. Did you feel that pressure at all in your community, Fran, to study medicine?
So I guess similarly to you, my parents were always on the liberal end of the spectrum. And I went through, like, as I said before, a series of career changes, and they were always supportive kind of all the way. There was one point where I actually wanted to become an Olympic swimmer, and my dad was still supportive. And like, I haven't swum in a couple of years, and that just goes to show what happened to that dream. But they were always supportive, and I guess they understood that you need to have a passion as the student who will be doing those exams, who will be going through university, who will be submitting all those courseworks to actually get you through a course such as medicine. And Kiran, I actually wanted to ask you about this, because obviously you're at the other end where I hope to be someday. You've gone through how long was your course? 5-6 years of medicine at Leeds? Five years of medicine at Leeds. And now you're doing your 3rd year of junior practice. What kind of motivated you, and what advice can you give to prospective students like myself, or who haven't even started med school, who are looking ahead at this really, really long-winded and intense degree, on how to get through?
So I think there's two parts to that. The first one is that university in general, no matter what you're studying, is so much fun. You're in a new place, you're meeting loads of new people, you're studying something that is actually really interesting. So that's the first part. So university itself is really fun and offers loads of opportunities outside of medicine. Loads of sports, loads of other societies. That, I was part of the Hindu Society, I was part of the badminton club, I was captain of the tennis team, I did, some public speaking sort of stuff, I was part of the comedy society. There's so many other things that are not medicine at university that you can look forward to. And the other side of it is that you get really close to your friends that are studying medicine, and you realize that everyone is doing it. Like, the work is hard, but everyone is doing it. So it's not like you're working exceptionally hard compared to other people, because everyone has to work hard. And I think having other like-minded people around you motivates you to work hard and study and do well in the exams, and to thrive really when you're at university. Just another quick point I wanted to mention before, when we were talking about, family and medicine and things like that. My parents always said that you need to pick something that earns you money, and then once you've done that, you can do whatever you want as like a side hustle and see if you can make something of that. So that for me was comedy, really. So I went to university to become a doctor. It's a good job. I was really lucky to get in, had a really good time, worked as a doctor, and you know, you get a really comfortable wage as a doctor, which I know someone's already asked about, which we could probably talk about.
Yeah.
And as well, I started university, which is started comedy, sorry, which is another passion of mine that I discovered when I was at university. So the way that I look at it is, if I wasn't at university in Leeds studying medicine like I was sort of geared towards, I would have never found these other passions of mine. So like, things happen for a reason, and a lot of my comedy content is medical related. So if I wasn't a doctor, I didn't have that USP, that unique thing of being able to do this medical comedy that so few people are doing, then, you know, things have sort of lined up perfectly for me. So that's the way I look at it anyway.
Sorry for that delay. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that kind of advice and kind of talking about your story of getting into medicine, your time there, and also kind of balancing that with your comedy. I guess we can like further explore that. So kind of, you mentioned how you found this interest and passion for comedy during med school. How was it kind of balancing doing that alongside a really intense degree? And also, it's very like a niche area, like medical comedy. Are there a lot of other comedians like yourself? Is it hard to maybe find gigs? Yeah, kind of just talk a bit more about that, because that's really, really interesting.
Sure. So I think there's a few more doctor comedians than you actually think about. So obviously Adam Kay is the one everyone thinks about now, because he's really famous because of his book. But
yeah.
The other ones, yeah, Paul Sinner is a doctor who's also a stand-up comedian. So he's actually on a show on ITV, I think, called The Chase. So he's also a doctor who's a comedian. There's a comedian called Lee Nelson, who you know, that's his stage name. Who's really famous. He's done Live at the Apollo and that sort of thing. He's also a doctor. So there's a few doctor comedians sort of dotted around everywhere. In terms of starting, I was at university, which is like such a good place to start because there's so many student gigs and stuff going on all the time. And also, although it's a really intense degree, I think if you're really passionate about something, you can find time for it. And you know, you talk about all this stuff when you're applying to university about, and it's really important to mention in your personal statement about wanting to have a balance in your life. So you talk about all the sports you play, the instruments you play, all the other things you do. But the reason you do that is so that you can show you've got a balance in your life. Because when you're working so hard, like you do at medical school, particularly at Oxford, like you are, or even when you're, you know, a doctor working in a hospital, you need that release so that you're not burning out as a, you know, medic or a doctor or whatever you're doing. So for me, that was comedy. And because I think as medics and aspiring medics, we are so used to working hard that I, in my hobby, also worked very hard. So I sort of excelled quite quickly in that because other people were doing it, whereas I was doing it with the mentality of a medic, working really hard at it and trying to reflect and trying to grow. And, you know, because I was at university, it was sort of a really good place to do that. And then eventually got onto the live comedy circuit. And you mentioned my working. It's actually my 4th year now because I did my FY1. So I finished medical school. I did my FY1, FY2, and then I took an FY3 year where I was a locum to earn a bit of money. I did a comedy tour and also went on this big holiday as well before starting my GP training.
Amazing. I guess later on we may explore kind of what you did during your FY3 year, how you funded kind of going abroad and all this amazing stuff that you did. And you kind of touched upon the importance of being able to manage your stress, especially in such a stress-inducing course such as medicine, which is incredibly fulfilling but can be quite overwhelming. And a question sent in by Mars asked, how do you manage stress? And they also ask, do you enjoy it now? So I guess we can explore the do you enjoy it part afterwards. So yeah, how do you go about managing your stress throughout med school and now as a practicing doctor?
I think so. Med school is like one thing because you work very hard, but I think managing stress is managing stress. So it's like the same as your everyday life. Um, so I think there's a few really good things that you can do. I think mindfulness is a thing that, you know, is becoming a lot more known about and a lot more accessible. And if you went to see your GP with something like stress or anxiety, the first thing they talk to you about is mindfulness. So there's lots of apps that you can use like Headspace or Calm. And I think going through those sorts of things is personally very helpful for me. So that's the first thing. The second thing is being able to talk to people about it as well. So sort of not just bottling all up and thinking, I've got all of these things to do, I'm really worried about them, but instead rationalize it and saying, look, really, these are the things I have to do. How am I going to go about achieving them? Once you have clear, you know, a clear head with targets and you know clearly what you need to do to achieve those targets, it's a lot sort of easier for you to then decide how you're going to go about doing things, really. So talking to family and friends, doing mindfulness exercises, and also having hobbies. So doing things that you just do for fun. It can be anything. It could be art, it could be music, it could be watching Netflix, it could be going to the gym, it could be gaming, literally anything that you find enjoyment from. You have to find time and set time aside to do that. I think that's one of the key things to reduce stress, really. What do you do any of those things? What do you think about reducing stress, Fran?
Yeah, so you kind of touched upon one of the kind of key and definitely upcoming methods of coping with stress, which is mindfulness. I know a couple of years back that the word, kind of all the apps that we think about when we think of mindfulness, so Headspace is one of them, weren't as known as they are now, but it's definitely a really, really good and important way of managing stress. So for me, it's all about, when it comes to mindfulness, it's about being in the present with my thoughts and my feelings, especially when I'm in those moments of stress. Because I realized just from introspection and reflecting that as soon as I feel a moment of stress, I always try to avoid that situation which is causing me stress, which, you know, temporarily can be okay. You know, if you've got a stressful essay that's waiting for you, which I had a lot of during med school, you can temporarily just stop thinking about it. But just in everyday life, it's not practical and just not feasible to go around avoiding everything that causes you stress. So mindfulness for me has been really, really important in being present with my emotions and just kind of acknowledging how I think, what my tics are, what my triggers are, and how I respond to them and adjusting them accordingly. So yeah, mindfulness is definitely one of them. And also identifying what my stress coping mechanisms are, because I don't know about you, but for me, when I realized what they were, I realized a lot of them were unhealthy and didn't kind of target the root of that stress, but instead found ways of like going around it. I don't know if you can relate, Kiran, but that was a really, really key part in me learning about managing my stress, especially in a more healthy way.
I kind of agree, and I think just touch on what you've said. I think I personally find myself most stressed and anxious last thing before bed, because I'm thinking about all the things I've got to do, and that keeps me up at night, and I sleep badly, and I'm worrying about sleeping badly, and it just makes the next day less efficient. So in that situation, for me, I think a really good thing to do, whether it's in the day or late at night, is to actually write down, so physically write down all of the thoughts that you're having about the things that you need to do. And once you've written down the things that you need to do, you're either going to look at that and say, actually, there's not that much, or actually, there's a lot, but here is how I go about practically doing them. Because there's no point worrying about it. What you actually need to do is make plans to start doing those things. And that is what you mentioned as the root cause of alleviating stress.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I hope people in kind of viewing the live stream are finding this useful, and keep sending in your questions. We're now going to try and kind of go through as many questions as possible, and I've kind of grouped the questions into themes. The first one is kind of moving on to your time working in the NHS as a junior doctor. So kind of before that, a question sent in asks, why did you choose GP and nothing else as an area to specialise in? And a linked question, which I guess you can answer, is, did you think that you were competent enough to start official training as a GP when you did?
Okay. So I'll start with the first one. So why did I choose GP? So there's two main parts of it. So I think the first part is that GP is a job in general. When I started working as a doctor in the hospital, I quite soon realized that although I find hospital medicine interesting, the intensity of it and the on-calls and the nights and the weekends, it wasn't really for me. So although I enjoyed it, I enjoyed all the science behind it, I enjoyed the impact you had on the patient. Actually, I realized that could I do that for the rest of my life? Probably not. And I know from my previous work experience and my work during my foundation years in a GP that you get a lot walking in the door that is sort of mental health and things like that. It's a lot more talking, and you get that same sort of relationship with patients as well. So that's part of it, is that I knew I didn't want to be a hospital doctor. And when I was in general practice, I really enjoyed it. I got on well with the people that I was working with. I had a really good relationship in the community with patients, and you're able to build that community really well. And also there's a lot of mental health stuff which really interests me as well. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, and you know, when you talk to a lot of people, honestly, this is partly their reason for doing GP, is the training is short and the lifestyle is good. So to train to be a consultant in the hospital after you finish your foundation years is going to be around 7 years, approximately. So if you want to be a consultant after you finish your F2, you're going to be working for another 7 years. The GP training is only 3 years. And on top of that, as a GP, you still have your weekends off the rest of your life. You still have the option to work part-time. You've got the option to work in sessions. So a session as a GP is like half a day, basically. So you can do 3-4 sessions a week, work part-time, still have hobbies, have time for your family, be able to do other things, and still live very comfortably. So there's that lifestyle aspect of GP that really appealed to me. And actually, talking about that lifestyle thing, a lot of people that are applying to GP, a lot of people that I meet are actually people that are already registrars. So they've already trained in medicine for 5 or 6 years, and then now they're deciding that actually they want the lifestyle of GP. So they're actually changing tracks and starting GP training. So there's a lot more people doing that now. So that mainly was my reasons, is that I didn't want to be a hospital doctor. I wanted to work in the community and have that relationship with patients. And the training is short, and the lifestyle of a GP is something that I really aspired to, really.
Incredible. And yeah, I just remember when I was doing my preparation for interviews, and you go through kind of all the courses online, the online courses, learning about how the GP, as you said, they're in much more of a relational position, because they're almost like the first point of contact of healthcare with the community, and you do get to consistently see the same patients coming in and out, and you build relationships with families, people in that community. So I guess in that sense it's definitely more rewarding. And I remember we were having a conversation beforehand, and you told me the statistic about how 50% of doctors specialize as GPs, which kind of blew my mind.
Oh well, I think there's a lot. I'm not sure about the exact statistics, okay, but I think there's a lot of people doing GP, because really the 3 main training pathways are GP, medicine, or surgery. So when I was at medical school, it wasn't really clear like what happens when you finish being a doctor, like what actually happens then. So you do 2 years foundation, you do F1, F2, then you can go into generally medicine, surgery, GP. That's it. There's some other specialities that are slightly different, but it's medicine, surgery, or GP. So it's kind of split pretty evenly. But for me, because the training pathway of GP was a lot more appealing, you have that relationship with patients. That's why I think that one was suitable for me. Have you got any idea about what you want to do? Because I know you're quite interested in the mental health side of things as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely split. I think surgery, I'm less interested in surgery as opposed to the other two kind of divisions. But I think I was telling you this before. Every time in my first year, we've had quite a couple of like lectures where doctors who've specialized in different things essentially come in to tell us about their speciality. And at the end of every single lecture, I'm like, oh, this is incredible. Like, I want to be a pediatrician. I want to do this. And then the next lecture comes along and the lecture seems to be even more enticing and incredible, and I'm like, I want to do this. So I'm still in a kind of, I'm still uncertain about what I want to do. But I guess speaking to people like you who are just starting your speciality and finding out why you want to do GP practice definitely helps in helping me decide. But I'm just thankful that I've got another 5 years down the line to decide, and longer actually. Yeah, and kind of next question that's been sent. Oh, you were going to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to respond to a comment that's come through.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about pay and about how much you get paid as a doctor and as a GP. And I think it's not something that doctors talk about very much. So can I ask you, Fran, do you know how much doctors get paid?
I remember like kind of searching up the statistics for FY1 doctors, so doctors who've just graduated, and I think it was around, is it 27,000, just above the average wage or something, which I found quite shocking because I always thought it was a lot higher. Kiran, I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, so see, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, is that you go into it because you want to do medicine, you want to be a doctor, you want to help people, that sort of thing. Like, I get it, but at the same time, we need to take more financial accountability of our lives. And especially as doctors, I don't think it's done enough. And I think people are a bit scared of talking about pay and how much they get paid and that sort of thing. But I think we need more accountability about it. You get paid. So you're right. The basic salary for an F1 doctor would be £27,000 in the UK-ish. But the thing is, if you do night shifts, you get an escalated rate, you'll get paid more. If you do evenings, you'll get paid an escalated rate, you'll get paid more. If you get weekends, you get more. So actually, it ends up being a lot more than you'd think. So when I was an F1 doctor, I was earning close to £40,000. So it's a lot more than you'd think, really. And one of the questions that came through was, why do American doctors earn more than doctors in the UK? And the simple answer to that is that healthcare in America is private. That's it. So the hospitals are private. So if you go to hospital, you'll get slapped with a big bill at the end. If you went to your local doctor, you get GP, you get a big bill at the end. If you got medicines from the pharmacy, you get a big bill at the end. That all contributes to what doctors are getting paid. So doctors in America will get paid 3-4 times as much, but actually, is that a system you really want to be part of? I think part of the beauty of the NHS is that it's free at the point of care for anyone. So anyone could walk in with a medical problem. If someone in the UK have you ever seen Breaking Bad?
I have indeed.
Yeah. So I remember seeing this meme that was like Breaking Bad, but set in the UK. And sorry for the spoiler, but obviously Walter White in Breaking Bad has cancer. And the point is, he can't pay for his treatment, so he starts dealing drugs. In the UK, the meme was Walter White goes to his doctor, has cancer, gets treatment for free. Like, that's it. The point is, he's got cancer. It's obviously not something that he's chosen to happen to himself. And he's been able to access the treatment for free. And I think that's such an amazing system that we've got. But as a consequence of that, obviously, healthcare staff are going to get paid less. So that's why we get paid less than American doctors.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that up. And I guess I don't think it would be as interesting seeing a Breaking Bad but UK version for the very reason you said. It'd be over in a couple of episodes. But yeah, 100% kind of agree with what you're saying. And kind of just to add, there are kind of opportunities to earn more as doctors who've qualified and work in the UK. For example, you can like part time go private. I don't know if you want to kind of elaborate on that later on, because there is still kind of a part of healthcare which is privatized in the UK. The NHS is a public service, but there are other services such as Bupa. I can't really name anything else, where doctors can actually work privately and get paid more if that's what you were interested in. But exactly as Kiran says, I think the NHS is so beautiful because we do have this free healthcare system which covers the majority of cases that come into the hospital doors, and kind of it's also important to acknowledge that a lot of, I think most of actually the wages and funding for the NHS is from taxation. So if doctors were to get paid more, that would kind of translate into more taxes. And we already know how that's going to go down in the UK. Not very well. But yeah.
So as well as that, so obviously your wage will get paid when you're training. But I don't know, before I mentioned that I took a year out. So after my FY2, which was a second year as a doctor, I took a year out and became what they call a locum doctor. So the locum doctor is someone who doesn't have a regular job. So I'm not in a training post and I don't have a regular job, but when shifts become available, I'm able to apply for them and take them. And, you know, I worked for 4 months and didn't have a single, I took the weekends off, but I didn't have a single day off. So I was able to fill every single day with these locum shifts. And those locum shifts are paid at 2 or 3 times as much as normal shifts because they're like fill-in shifts, basically. So there's less job security with that. But I mean, it shouldn't be, but if your sole purpose of becoming a doctor is to earn money, a lot of people stay doing that for a long time and can earn close to 80, £100,000 at this very early stage of their career just by taking these extra shifts like that.
Something interesting that someone told me was that if you kind of want to do medicine for the money, then you're in the wrong profession completely. And going into university and interacting with people doing different courses, I've actually found out that if you actually your sole purpose in life or focus in life was money, there are honestly such better career paths, such as consultancy, law. So one of my best friends in college, she's doing law and they interact with all these big firms in London who come in and have dinners with them. And she was telling me about a training scheme after she graduates, and she was telling me the statistics that within 2-3 years, if she stayed in this scheme, she'd be earning up to £100,000 if she worked in London. Absolutely crazy. But I guess moral of the story, yeah. I guess if your main drive is money, the UK NHS is not for you, and I don't think that will be enough motivation to get you through. At least for me, it won't be enough motivation to get me through med school and working in the NHS, which is incredibly draining, but again, really rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. I think if that is your motivation, like we talked about, it's just too hard work and there's easier ways to make the money than this. But exactly what you said, like the reason we do it is because it's also like a rewarding but also intellectually stimulating job. So you'll learn, and the things that you learn at medical school now, you can practically apply to your job later. And that's what makes medical school really fun and really interesting, is because lots of courses people are attending and they're learning about something or other that they're never going to be able to use in their life. But pretty much everything that you're learning, you will at some point be able to apply that. And it doesn't feel like it now. You're learning lots of like random textbook things about cells and this and that. But at some point, I promise you, at some point when you're a doctor, you'll look back and be like, I'm sure I learned about this somewhere. And it was then. It's where you are now, basically.
That's really, really reassuring because I'm definitely one of those people who have been doing essays about cell and cellular biology thinking, how in heck does this relate to like being a doctor? But I guess it's quite reassuring to hear from you that one day it will be useful. And that's what we're going to speak about next, kind of the differences between actually working in the NHS versus your time in medical school. But before that, questions came up asking about what you feel, how do you feel about the changes that happened to junior doctor wages? I think this happened a couple of years ago, and they go on to say, how can I discuss this in interview?
Sure. So, you see, I was the first year that was on the new wages. So I don't really know what the old wages are like. So I can't really talk about experience comparing the old wages to the new wages. I can just talk about what I know from starting work. And from what I understand, the way it was changed is such that it became a bit bottom heavy, which meant you got paid a little bit more than you would have done at the start of your career, so in your F1 and your F2, but at the end of your career, you're earning a little bit less than you would have been before. The ins and outs of it, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I'm sure there's videos on YouTube where people explain it. And also another good resource would probably be the BMA website, so the British Medical Association website. So the BMA are like our body that represents all of the doctors. They're the ones that negotiate with the government about these contracts and then put it to us, and then we can vote about them. So if you're researching for medical school interviews or for just your own knowledge, the best place to go to would be the BMA website, where you'd be able to sort of get up-to-date information about contracts and all of that sort of thing.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that resource. And for those of you who are interested in checking out the website, I've just put the name on screen. So BMA website, type it into Google and I'm sure you'll find it. But yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I guess now we'll go on to talk about your experiences working as a doctor and how they compared to what you thought or your preconceptions in med school. Were there any myths that as soon as you started working were instantly debunked?
Sure. I think one of the main ones is that you're working all of the time and you don't have any time for anything else. And it's not true, because you do have time for other things and you do nights and weekends. And I think that's the biggest shock. And that's something that you can't appreciate when you're at medical school, because when I was at medical school, when I was in third year, we did 2 days a week placement. When I was in fourth year, we did 3 days a week placement. And when I was in final year, we had placement every day of the week. And you're just seeing the 9 to 5 day of the doctor. But what you don't really understand or appreciate is the on-call side of things. And the on-call side of things is where medicine gets really interesting and where it gets really difficult. Do you know much, Fan, about being on call as a doctor?
So to my understanding, you have a bleep, and anytime a doctor anywhere in the hospital needs someone within your speciality, then you'll be that doctor on call who will go to the scene of whatever's happening. But besides that, I'm not exactly sure.
Sure. So that's kind of right. So often you'll carry a bleep, but rather than doctors calling you, so you and your friends working as new doctors will go to the hospital 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, you'll go home. So after 5 o'clock, the on-call doctor will cover those wards. So you'll be maybe covering a number of wards. If a nurse has a concern about a patient, they will call you to come. So the same thing happens at night. So when you're at night, when you're on call, obviously the people who are there in the daytime are not there. If a patient is unwell or a nurse needs something doing, they'll contact you and they can speak to you like that. So being on call in the hospital is where you learn the most, because you're often there with fewer other doctors, so you're having to do a lot more, and also you're seeing more unwell patients. So, you know, it's a lot more intense. I think going back to the original question was, you know, the transition between medical school and being a doctor. I wasn't prepared for or used to all of the night shifts that we'd be doing. So I just finished a weekend of night shifts where you work from 9 p.m. in the evening till 9:30 a.m. in the morning. And by the time you get home, it's like 10, 10:30. And like, in my life, I'd never been awake for that kind of time. And like, maybe you'd be going out with your friends and you'd be up to like 2, 3, 4, but like you're never awake till 10 o'clock in the morning. So that's really difficult to get used to, but I feel like you learn a lot from it. And the other myth that I mentioned briefly was that you never have any time. So if you've done a weekend of night shift like I have, you get 2 days off. So I have Monday off and I have today off where I'm not working. So it's not true that you don't get time. You are working hard and you're working a lot of hours and it's intense, but at the same time, you're compensated for that with time off a little bit later. Is there anything that you in particular are worried about starting work? Is there anything anyone said to you about being a doctor that makes you think, you know, does that really happen, that you're a bit scared about?
So someone's actually mentioned one of my biggest concerns in the comment section. Let me try and find it. Something about consultants. I can't see. Oh, right, here it is. Is it true that consultants always look down on junior doctors, treat them badly? And it actually reminds me of one of my work experience placements within cardiology, and the consultant was absolutely brutal. And I was shadowing, I think, 3, 4 junior doctors. Some of them were FY1s, some of them were FY2s, some of them were physician, sorry, so I think it's slightly different. But we were going on ward rounds and randomly the consultant would turn around and just test and quiz these junior doctors on their medical understanding. And yeah, it related to the conditions that they were seeing on the ward rounds, but he was asking really technical questions and he was going round one by one, and these junior doctors looked like they were absolutely sweating. And I remember he actually asked me, because he must have thought I was a junior doctor, and I remember the other doctors just saying, oh no, she's a student, like she doesn't know. And he still asked me, and I just felt really on the spot and pressurized, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is taking me back to, like, you know, school and how it feels like to be put on the spot. And I was wondering if that's is that always the case? Are there consultants like that, or is that, I don't know, was that just a one-off consultant?
So it's not a one-off consultant. As much as I'd say it was a one-off, it's not a one-off consultant. So that's a really old school way of doing medicine. It's these big ward rounds with loads of people where the consultant fires questions at everyone. And exactly what you've said is what I saw on my work experience before I went to medical school as well, in a hospital. The consultant asking questions and embarrassing the doctor in front of people. So that does happen, but it's slightly older school way of doing things. Now, there's a lot more appreciation for colleagues and for people that are working. So I think it's changed a lot now. Consultants do still ask you direct questions, but the reason they're doing it is not to embarrass you. Some people are just like that and they're trying to embarrass you, and fine, let them do it, whatever. But most of the time, they're doing it so that you learn. And if you are learning, you know, what you saw, you've not forgotten it. And the doctor who they were asking, he's not forgotten it, or she's not forgotten it either.
Yeah.
So it's a really horrible way of learning, but they will have learned something. And I think they used to do it a lot more, but now that sort of consultant is getting phased out. So, you know, it does still happen, but I think less. And consultants don't really look down on their junior doctors. They know that you're a new doctor and that you're not going to have the same level of knowledge as maybe other people. So everyone appreciates that. So you at no point will feel like you're being made silly or anything like that. You know, you get treated appropriately for your level, and everyone is trying to help you learn. They're not trying to embarrass you, and it's quite a, you know, a good environment to be learning in. I think it's changed. I think it used to be rough, whereas now it's a lot better. Medicine in general has changed, actually. It used to be very paternalistic, where the consultant comes in and says, you need to have this done, and the patient says, yes, doctor, and has that done. Whereas now, the decisions that a doctor makes are a shared decision between the doctor and the patient, and you are able to ask your consultant, why are we doing that? Is that the right thing to do? And instead of barking back at you and being angry that you've talked to them, they will explain to you why it's been done. So the whole culture of medicine is changing, but consultants are no one to be scared. It's no one to be scared of.
Amazing, definitely reassuring. And I guess that's a sense of kind of hope to look forward to, that this culture of medicine is transitioning from, it just kind of reminds me of like the medical dramas that you'd see, particularly Dr. House. And that culture definitely would put off anyone from maybe potentially wanting to look to medicine. But I really like how now it's shifting into a more nurturing environment where, yes, they want you to learn and increase in your medical understanding and knowledge, but they also kind of respect you for the position, the experience, and everything else, which is quite reassuring. And
exactly. I just spotted another couple of questions, Fran, if that's cool.
Go for it.
So, some really short ones. Someone said, what is the youngest age you could be a GP? So, you finish school at 18, you do 5 years of medical school. If you go to medical school, that's 5 years. Obviously, Fran's is 6 years, but mine was 5 years. So that's 18 to 23. At 23 years old, you do your foundation training. So that's 23, 24, and then you do your GP training. So you'd finish your GP training age 27. So the youngest age you could be a GP, unless you went to university early, is 27 years old. Someone else said, is there any work to do after your shift ends? The answer is no. So once you're done, you're done. Sometimes you have to stay late to finish work, or if there's a patient that's unwell, but there's an on-call team in the hospital that we already talked about, that if you've got unfinished things, you tell the on-call doctors who are working there till later, and they'll finish off your things. But you don't take any work home with you. But when you start off, it is quite difficult because you come home and you'll always be thinking, did I remember to do this? Did I remember to do this? Is that person going to be okay? Like, it's natural to think like that. So you do take that home with you, but you have no actual physical work to do. So when you get home, you can put your feet up, you can binge watch something on Netflix and just relax completely.
Cool. And kind of on that subject of kind of once you leave work, essentially you can take off the work hat and just kind of almost return to your everyday life. What is your work-life balance been like? At the start, did you struggle with it more, especially with the night shifts? That like completely shifts your sleep schedule. Like that's almost like an extended jet lag for me when I think about it. What was it like transitioning from, you know, being in med school to having to do a series of night shifts whilst also trying to maintain your social life? Was it easy? Did you struggle? Did you have to sacrifice a couple of events that you would regularly go to?
I think it's hard. So med school is hard, right? Med school is hard work, but working as a doctor is a different kind of hard because there's a lot more physical hours you've got to be in, and I think that's one of the hardest things. And so when you're new at anything, it's going to be more difficult than if you've been doing something for ages. So starting something new, like a new job as a new doctor, is quite tough because it's so new to you. You're learning new computer systems. You're learning to how to handle patients. You're learning to keep relationship with colleagues. You're learning to do all of these different things that it's exhausting, right? And for a few months, it is really exhausting. But I think eventually, once you've been doing it for a little while, for example, now I go to work and do things without even thinking about it. I've been doing it for almost over 3 years now. So you go into work and you don't even think about a lot of the things that you're doing because it's so automatic now. So it gets a lot easier over time to sort of develop more of a balance because you're not constantly having to think about these things. One of the big impacts that medicine has on your life is that you have to do on-calls. So doing the on-calls means that you are working a certain number of weekends. So it's difficult, and because your rotation, so when you start your F1, so your first year as a doctor, you do 3 4-month rotations. And your annual leave, you get 9 days off every 4 months. And some weekends you're working. So you won't get your rota for that 4 months until just before that 4 months starts. So you can't plan to go to your friend's wedding now. I got a friend who's getting married in April. I can't plan if I'm going to go to their wedding because I don't have my rota for April yet. I'll find out in December whether I can go or not. And if I'm scheduled to be on call, you can't take annual leave for a time when you're on call. If you're scheduled to be on call, you have to try and swap with someone. So trying to swap with someone sounds really easy, but it is so difficult because everyone else has an on-call rota. You might be trying to swap with someone, but they might be on call that weekend, or they might be on nights that weekend, or they might be on nights the week before or the week after, so they can't do that weekend. Or so the number of people you can actually swap with is 1 or 2, and if they say no, there's nothing you can do. You have to go to work.
And that's so crazy. That's the first time I've heard about that. And what if it was your actual wedding? Like, is that an extenuating circumstance or?
Yeah. So basically, there's guidance on the BMA website where they talk about these exceptional circumstances in which you have to get leave.
Okay.
And you have to get leave for your own wedding, but any other wedding is not on the list as far as I'm aware. So even if it's your brother's wedding or your sister's wedding, as far as I'm aware, that's still not considered an extenuating circumstance. But, you know, everyone's human, and if you talk to the rota people and say it is my brother's wedding, like, they will help you try and swap if it's really, really important. But if you said it's my friend's wedding, they'd just be like, get lost, basically.
Wow, I'm relieved to hear that they consider like your own wedding as an extenuating circumstance, because that would have just been crazy otherwise.
Just the day though, not the day before, just the day.
This is absolutely crazy. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, kind of moving on to our next few questions, as we've got about 10 more minutes left on this live stream. An interesting one sent in by Gal with Love asks, what would you say are your weaknesses as a med student for me and as a GP trainee for you? And how do you go about ameliorating your weaknesses? I can never pronounce that word. Ameliorating? Yeah, I'm just going to stop trying.
So, Fran, what did you say? If you got asked in an interview, what would you have said your weaknesses are? And then tell me what you actually think your weaknesses are.
Okay, I have to think about the interview one now, because I would not have said the answer I have in my head in an interview, which is really bad. In the spirit of integrity. But this would be my off-camera or off-interview answer. I'm not the best person to do... Actually, no, this is wrong. I have trust issues when it comes to group work. Reason being is I came from a school and a background where people didn't often pull their own weight when it came to group work. So I've grown to be very much independent, dependent on my work and my work alone. So to move into an atmosphere at med school where a lot of the time you do have to rely on other people because you genuinely cannot get through the whole course by yourself was quite hard for me to adapt, and it just means that I'm not naturally as much as a team player as I should be, and this would not have been my this would have not have been my interview question at all. In the interview, I'm the best team player ever.
You sound like the worst person to be in a group with.
No, I'm not.
The person that's looking over your shoulder, making sure you're doing the work.
No, not at all. No. I pull my weight and I do all the work.
Okay.
But I just came from a background where no one does the work, and I'm always the person to ask for help a couple of hours before the exam. And just a little bit of trouble. What about you? And whilst you give your answer, I'll think about my interview answer.
Okay. In terms of what I would say I'm not good at is we've talked about balance quite a few times. And I think as medics, we naturally want to work hard. But the problem is when you're working hard at so many things, you get really run down. And I struggle to find the balance of, the middle ground. So I work really hard when I'm a doctor in the hospital. I work really hard at home doing sort of comedy things. I work really hard on this YouTube channel that I've now started that everyone needs to subscribe to. I work hard. I work hard in these lots of different things, and I'll work so hard and I'll get less sleep and I'll start feeling more unwell, and then I'll be like sick. I'll be like unwell for like a week and be like out of everything because I've not been able to find that balance. And it's something that sort of I'm still working on, and I think everyone is to an extent trying to work on these sorts of things. But I say that's probably one of the things I'm worst at, is that I get ill so frequently. So I say like a couple of 2-3 weeks a year, purely because I'm trying to do too much, basically. So now I want to hear your interview answer.
My interview answer. The funny thing about these interview answers is, especially when they ask you what your weaknesses are, you're actually presenting a strength, but in a very humble way. It's so funny because you always say something that's an ideal quality, but you always take it too far. So my interview answer, which is actually quite true, is that I'm almost a perfectionist when it comes to studying, in the sense that for A levels, you were giving a syllabus and it was feasible for you to cover every single element of that syllabus to the core and be able to know the answer to every single question on your exam papers. Whereas now I've moved to med school and there's just so, like, medicine has no bounds. There's so much content and so much depth to all the content. I cannot feasibly cover it. And that was something I struggled a lot with in first year. We've got this mad syllabus and it was crazy because the amount of content we covered in just one term, I'd like to say, is almost triple the content that we had for all my A levels combined. Maybe that was a lie, I don't know. But yeah, that's definitely one of the weaknesses of mine, and as a result it's meant that I've covered the content in the like more than enough depth but not enough breadth. Like it got so bad to the extent that I had to have a meeting with one of my tutors to discuss changing my revision strategy because I was just going into too much depth. And I guess as a doctor it's not possible to know everything and everything, and naturally as ambitious students we get frustrated at ourselves for not knowing everything. And I guess that's the reason why specialities exist, because it'd be crazy to know every speciality in the detail that they do know it in.
And I think that's the problem, is that you've come from a place where you did GCSEs and you did A levels, and you can when you're doing GCSEs you can learn everything about that subject in that syllabus. In A levels you can learn pretty much everything about that to an extent. When you get to medical school, like you said, you literally can't. People are working for decades to try and learn this stuff, so you can't learn that to the same depth, which is exactly what you were saying. So I get that. That's a good answer.
I know. I was gonna say it's a pretty good interview answer. Cool. I'm just kind of looking through any. Okay, there's some that have just been sent in now. Oh, an interesting one sent in by Alicia asks, have you read This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay? And if so, is this an accurate depiction of life as a junior doctor?
So I have read it. I thought it was a really good book. What I would say is it's not anymore. It used to be, but Adam Kay was a junior doctor doing that a long time ago. So things have changed dramatically since then. There's a new thing called the European Working Time Directive, where you basically have to have a certain amount of time off. So you have to have a certain amount of time between shifts, maximum number of hours you can work in a week. So that's all part of the new junior doctor contract. So when he was a doctor, they would make you work silly amounts without breaks. You were really tired all the time. You couldn't sleep. You made mistakes. That's changed now a bit. And we talked about how medicine used to be more paternalistic, and now it's not. It's a lot of shared decision making. That's also a massive change that you can see from when Adam Kay's there. That book actually came out of the fact that when you start working as a doctor, you have to do lots of these reflections. So you have to reflect on cases that you've seen and the way you feel about things and what you've learned from them. So what Adam Kay has done is he's taken those reflections, added the funny parts to them, and released it as a book, basically. So I absolutely love the book, but I think times have changed since he was doing it. So it's not nearly as bad as he makes it out now.
Cool. And I was going to ask, have you read, I think there's a Christmas version of it where he includes all the kind of everything that he didn't include in his original This Is Going to Hurt?
I've not read that yet, no. Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet, but I've heard good reviews. It's definitely on my list to read.
Cool. So, yeah, I've not read it. I'm definitely going to read it as well.
For sure. And yeah, This Is Gonna Hurt. It's definitely a good recommendation. Like, I just found myself laughing, like, every 5 minutes when I was reading the book. It's absolutely hilarious. And yeah, final question, which I guess we can both answer before ending this live stream, is sent in by Mandy, who asks, hi, do you think as a future medical student, should I retake these GCSEs? So she got 4 9s, 6 8s, 2 7s, and just to kind of translate that, I think that's 10 A stars and 2 A's. And she talks about how she thinks she could have done better, and but you'd have to juggle doing your GCSE revision with your A levels. And one thing to quickly say is that those GCSEs that you've been given are absolutely amazing, and Kiran will probably be able to speak better on the behalf of Leeds Med School and what they were looking for. But in terms of the med schools I applied to, so Oxford Imperial, where else? KCL, and also Edinburgh, although they did put an emphasis on your GCSEs, a lot of med schools and the med schools I applied to take more of a holistic approach. So GCSEs was only one of the factors they looked at, alongside stuff to do with your personal statement, stuff to do with your UCAT, your admission score. So please don't stress yourself about resitting the GCSEs that you've already got really, really amazing grades for. Like, they're way better than the statistics that I got, and it's incredible for you to do so well. And it's also important to realise, especially with this year's cohort, you didn't actually sit the exams. So med schools in the future are going to be way more lenient when they see that, okay, you got your GCSEs in 2020, so you may have done way better had you done the exams, you may have done way worse. So I guess they'll put more emphasis on your A levels, which you will be sitting. So in my personal opinion, A levels are tough, and it's better to focus on your A levels, and your GCSE grades are amazing. Kiran, what about other med schools, the ones you applied to? Did they put an emphasis on GCSE grades as much?
I think pretty much similar to what you said, is that some medical schools obviously have requirements for GCSE, so obviously check those out before you actually apply for them. But in general, and especially Leeds where I went, it's more of a all-rounded thing. So they don't want just GCSEs, they also want good predicted A levels, they want sports, they want a really nice personal statement, they want a UCAT score. There's so many other things that are part of it. So I wouldn't stress too much if one part of your application is, in your opinion, a bit weaker, because it just means you're going to have to try and strengthen it in other ways. So certain universities put emphasis on different things, right? So I think, and also from what those grades that you read out, they sound absolutely fine. So nothing to stress about.
Exactly. And I guess the time that you would kind of save from maybe not resitting your GCSEs, you can put into pursuing, hobbies or things that would go towards making your application shine that bit more. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. And I guess we've came to the end of today's live stream. I think we've answered the majority of questions. If we haven't, please don't feel afraid to reach out to either me or Kiran via Instagram. Our details will be in the description bar below. We'll try our best to respond to you and answer any questions that you may have. And yeah, first of all, I'd just like to thank Kiran for taking the time out of his really, really busy schedule to come on and live stream and teach us all about the realities of being a junior doctor. You were incredible, and it was a pleasure having you on the channel.
No, of course, Fran. Thanks so much for having me. I'd love to do it again at some point as well. And, it was fun to answer people's questions as well. So it was really a good thing to do.
Amazing. And yeah, if you
also
go for it,
make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel on YouTube. It's at Another Indian Doctor, and also my Instagram is at Another Indian Doctor.
Amazing. I was going to say the exact same things. Great minds think alike. But yeah, for reference, if you want to find Kiran's channel, if you want to have a bit of comedy, a little bit of entertainment, definitely check out his videos. You'll find it in the description bar below. But yeah, guys, it's been a pleasure having all of you guys watching these live streams and continuing to kind of, listen to me waffle alongside other amazing people. And yeah, I guess with that said, I'm gonna love you all and leave you and see you guys in the next video. Take care and have a lovely rest to your day. Bye.